Hi, my name's Cordy, and unfortunately you're too late, we've just closed. The Wednesday video I talk about what I'm going to be working on this week. Actually this week I've been working on some altered ideas. I'll probably come to those a little bit later on. So today we're going to be talking about a few different bits and pieces that I'm working on, some concepts. Before we get to those, it'd be cool if you could like and subscribe and maybe hit the bell notification, so you get to see the new videos that I'm bringing. Hopefully some of them are useful for you. If you do find anything useful in the channel, you think, oh, I want to support that guy to do a bit more, there's a buy me a coffee link. Only do that if you really want to and can afford it, don't if not. Liking and subscribing really helps, so on with the video. But last night I was doing a live stream and I was asked about ideas for playing outside. So in the jazz world, there's a thing known as playing outside. In the fusion world, there's a little bit of a thing, definitely a thing for playing outside. And in the blues world, there's a tiny like fringe part of the blues world where people kind of experiment with playing outside. Playing outside, I guess, really is do something a sec. So if we were to play inside this chord, so all of this is inside. So that's the sound of being inside, so you're playing chords and a harmony that kind of connect with the underlying thing. If I was to play outside, things might sound a bit different, so let's just experiment with the thing. The outside parts are the parts where I'm pulling notes essentially from outside of whatever the kind of scale that I in theory should or could have been using traditionally over like a C minor vamp. So one of the things that I was doing there was sort of playing an E major over that. And you hear what that essentially does is create a tension. So before we talk about strategies that you might try for this kind of outside sound, I first want to talk really about context for where it makes sense to use any of this stuff. Basically, you probably don't want to be the guitarist who's doing this in the middle of a wedding gig. You don't want to be the guy who, in the middle of Mr. Brightside, pulls out a weird diminished lick, or implies that they're playing in the tone above wherever the actual song is. Frankly, probably most of the people in the band are going to think you're off on one, and probably a bunch of the audience are going to think you've made a mistake. There's a context for where this stuff kind of makes sense. So I think where this kind of idea comes from, if you trace it back, is probably people like John Coltrane that sort of pushed the envelope on this sort of stuff, implying that the harmony was somewhere other than it actually was, and sort of floating off above the harmony is kind of the sound of it, I guess. When you get into the jazz fusion stuff, like kind of later Miles Davis, you see loads of this kind of stuff, predominantly I think because they're actually playing quite a lot on quite boring kind of jazz fusion-y, just vamp ideas, I say boring relative to like the kind of rich harmonies of some of the jazz standards that they would have been playing from like the 30s and 40s. You've moved from that to more of a kind of static harmony style, when it went into their brass synth era and all that sort of stuff that you can see videos of online. So I think that's kind of where that's coming from. If you're interested in getting into the idea of playing outside, then kind of recognize where your opportunities for this are. So in tunes like So What, or tunes like Footprints, or tunes which have a relatively simple harmony, maybe one or two changes, absolutely that's an area that you could start to kind of explore some of these ideas. That's my thoughts on that. So maybe start off with like a simple-ish loop like this. So the first idea that I suggest might work is to just shift whatever you're playing up a semitone and then come back down. What's important about playing outside is that you have confidence in the part that you're exploring new territory, and that you're then bringing it back to home confidently and also competently. So you want to be trying to place it in time and on a strong tone, or a note that very much sounds like you're home again. So let's just try and experiment with that. So I'm going to be playing in C minor, and what I'm going to do is move that pentatonic box shape up, so slide it up a fret so that I've got like a C sharp minor or E major pentatonic, and we'll see what happens. So hopefully you can hear there that I'm trying to kind of land back on strong tones quite quickly. I think it really only makes sense to do these outside lines if you have a strong grasp of how it would work to play inside first. And also, for me, it doesn't make sense to necessarily stay outside for too long, because things just start to sound quite weird quite quickly, in my opinion. In the jazz world, you'll find that this sort of thing does happen, but I'm not sure whether it's the best thing for your audience. Maybe it's like a thing that you're expressing, and maybe it gets across some kind of artistic message, but I know for me as a listener of jazz, when people stay in this kind of outside realm for too long, it kind of sounds a little bit like unpleasant to me. So that's the first idea. Shift things up a semitone. So you could try things like a general pentatonic lick that would still work. That kind of thing. So you're shifting where normally you'd go. Just start shifting. Shifting just little parts of those kind of sequences up a semitone. I think you could easily go down a semitone too. Another thing that is kind of popular in the jazz world is like taking a lick, so maybe even the lick, and playing that outside. So you could try that kind of idea. So we'll take like that kind of little thing that sounds a little bit like the lick. Like the sound of any of those, but that's the kind of idea. And what you could do is just try and shift them randomly, or you could try and put them in like fourths or something. So ideas like that. So that's actually home. Let's try it there. So we'll then shift that up a fourth. So we'll start it on a G. So that still works. So then another starts to get outside. The other thing about this stuff, which I'd say use it sparingly. If every other lick that you play is outside, I think it starts to sound kind of tiring. So in the middle of a solo, maybe you try a few of these techniques. Certainly in the practice room you try a lot of them, but it's the kind of thing like altered licks and stuff which, if you listen to someone like Robin Ford for instance, some of his most effective altered licks are like this one sort of amazing lick in the middle of a solo, and he's only really touched on that scale one time. And then that's like a surprising sound. I think if every second note you play is outside, you're not really surprising anyone, and it probably just sounds a little bit strange. So step 1, shift things a semitone either side of where you were. Step 2, play a lick and move it around. I guess step 3, we could do this kind of thing where we are taking a phrase and just moving it stepwise repeatedly. So that kind of thing can work quite nicely because you build up like an expectation, and because it's a repeating pattern, it doesn't sound crazy to people's ears. Something like that. So take a pattern, it can be anything, it could even be like odd note groupings. But again, the aim is to have a successful dismount. So you want to be kind of thinking about where your end goal is. Maybe listen as the lick is moving up. Listen as you're playing for where the kind of stepping off point might be, so that you can successfully dismount from your outside and land back inside on like a strong phrase or a strong lick that makes it sound like you meant what you were doing. So 2 more ideas. One of them is to use like a tritone kind of sound. So if we are playing C minor and we use an E flat triad, you could do this thing where you play an E flat triad into an A major triad into another E flat, and it's moving up in tritones. So that's got a sound to it. So that sort of thing, pick tritones and things like that, and arpeggios that sound outside, but so I'm just going to pepper in the A major triad to like a bit of improvisation, and you'll kind of hear that sounds like outside and tension, but not in a particularly gross way, because it's kind of that tritone relation. So those are some of my ideas for if you want to start exploring playing outside, but use them with caution, practice it a while first. But what is more important than anything is just to have confidence in the idea that you're playing, and then dismount successfully and dismount strongly back in the key that you were in, and it will sound like what you were doing was basically an intended exploration. That's kind of my tips for playing outside. As I say, it's not something that I use an awful lot. For me, I'm generally trying to play inside for most of the stuff that I play. If it did come to it and I was playing on an amp like this for any reason, like a funk tune or something like that, then perhaps if the situation was right, these are some of the strategies that I might use. So hopefully that was helpful. Now on to some other stuff. So I'm practicing some altered stuff. So we'll take like a So what we're going to take are triads that naturally occur within the melodic minor scale and apply them over that B flat, which is coming from the altered side of the thing. Use triads from E altered or F melodic minor, and just listen to the way they sound over that altered B flat, which is coming from the altered side of the thing. So yeah, that's just an idea that I've been playing around with. And so the idea of this stuff is, so like if you were to find all of the triads in the major scale, so major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. For the melodic minor scale, we can do exactly the same thing. So that's how I ended up working out what those triads would be. So I think some of that is quite a cool sound, something I'm going to experiment with a bit more. So that's one of the other things that I'm working on this week, aside from the tune Mercy, 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 which I'm going to have to spend a bit more time on, but that's basically like a gospel tune, so none of these particular approaches that I'm working on, or the outside stuff, will necessarily apply to the tune that I'm working on this week, but since I talked about it last night, I thought maybe it would be worth chatting about today. So hopefully that's been helpful. If it has, that's cool. Ways to support the channel, you can like and subscribe if this was useful. Also, I've got a buy me a coffee link if there was anything particular in there that was useful to you and you wanted to make a one-off kind of coffee thing so that I could fill up my coffee cup. Otherwise, you know, liking, subscribing and commenting just helps, and if you want backing tracks and stuff and tabs, those are on my Patreon. That's where I put all that stuff. So hopefully that's been some help, and I'll catch you soon for another video.